If you are struggling to embrace the body you actually have, or you're looking for that perfect supplement that's going to make you skinny and nicer to your kids at the same time, or maybe you're stressed out as a woman experiencing life derailments in a new season of life. Well, listen, if any of those are true for you, this episode is my gift to you. Not only is this the 100th episode of Unperfect, yay! It is also an episode filled with practical and compassionate advice from a doctor who has experienced all the things I just mentioned and has much grace and insight to share with us from her life today. So listen in. Hey friend, do you desire to connect with God in real and tangible ways? Do you struggle with the reality that life just hasn't gone the way you imagined it would? Well, you have come to the right place and you're not alone. I'm Shelly Sneed, the host of Unperfect, and it's my weekly mission to inspire women like you and me to grow spiritually through authentic stories rooted in the truth of God's Word. Hope and probably some humor are coming up. Hello, friends. I am so excited about our episode today, about my guest. I know I say that every time, but it's because I have such amazing guests on the show. But today I am here with Dr. Michaela Albertsen. She is a board-certified family practice doctor and well-being advocate who is passionate about women's health and healing in the middle of our messy, ordinary lives. She is the author of Ordinary on Purpose, which we're going to have you back and talk about that book because that is all what I'm all about here at Unperfect. But she inspires readers to aim for wholehearted living through a gentle, achievable, sustainable approach. And that is what I have loved about this book because it is all of those things. It is, we can do this. Yep. We can do this. So she and her husband have 5 children and live near Salt Lake City, Utah. But Michaela, welcome to the Unperfect podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I have touted off some of your accomplishments, but I wonder if you would just take a moment and tell us a little bit more about you that you want us to know.
Yeah, sure. So I am a family practice doctor by training. I did a 1-year fellowship at the end of my training, specifically in women's health. And so I've been out in clinical practice for 18 years, and many of my patients were women, which is fun. And then as a family physician, though, I get to see families. So sometimes I would get to see women as patients, but then sometimes I would get to see them as the mom and their kids would be my patients. And so that was really fun. A couple of years ago, I actually left my clinic work and started writing full time. And right when I left that job, I started writing my newest book, which is called Everything I Wish I Could Tell You About Midlife, because here I am now in midlife. I'm 45. I have a well over 20-year marriage, and I have 5 kids. They range from 20 all the way down to 8. So we were just talking about that before we came on. I've got elementary school, middle school, high school, and college right now. And my oldest is newly married, and we're expecting a grandchild this summer. And so I'm just kind of in that middle stage, trying to figure out what's coming next. Many of my conversations with other moms on the soccer sideline are about our bodies and what the heck is going on with hormones and what are we doing with our lives and all of those questions I think that come up in midlife. And so that's what really led me to want to write it all down, because I'm experiencing so many of the things that I've been seeing women in clinic for close to 2 decades.
Sure. And that's one of the things I loved about reading your book too, was all the different stories you had of, personal stories, which I love because then I just feel like, okay, I get this person they're a real person, this book I'm reading. But then stories of people that have been, in your practice, and then the medical piece. So I laughed the other day. I was thinking by the time you get done reading this book, the reader, I think, wants you to be, I want you to be my doctor, and I want to go get coffee with you as my friend. So I love that in your book, we really just feel like we're not alone. Like, this is so normal. In fact, I'm going to read this quote because this might have been my favorite quote in the book. You say, We are living inside difficult and complicated bodies, walking around in very difficult and complicated lives. Life is simply hard, and it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're living a life, which is so true. I think, I don't know why we women are so hard on ourselves, but we are, and we tend to think everyone else is doing it right. I'm doing something wrong. So I just love that. I think anyone in any stage of life will get so much from this book. So I do want to put that out there, even though it says midlife. If you're 25, 30, go ahead and get it because it's going to prepare you for some things. But one of the things that I think, whether you're 23 or 93, that we need to hear is how you talk about body image. And you were just talking about this with the mom on the soccer field. And that this whole culture of health and beauty and wellness is pushing us to be someone that there's no way we can possibly be. It's not attainable. It's not sustainable. It's not realistic. And I think it can be a sensitive topic due to whatever your past is or what people have gone through. So I wonder if you would just talk a little bit about how you approach this topic in your book.
Sure. Well, I think of all of the topics in the book, this one's maybe the most personal to me. And this chapter I led with kind of my own story. And I wish I could say that I have that all figured out now and just tidied up, but I still struggle there. And I think we are sold, like you said, this picture or this ideal of what we're supposed to look like and how our bodies are supposed to be. And it is inescapable. I have an 8-year-old now, and every once in a while, she'll even say some comments at 8 because she can see in commercials or on billboards or really everywhere we turn, images of the ideal woman's body. And so I think that's just really tricky for us. We've been trying to figure it out all our lives. And then in the middle of midlife, suddenly these bodies that maybe we got used to a little bit begin changing a little bit. And so we're kind of back at it all over again, right? So I think that one mindset shift for me and what I keep coming back to is I want to worry much less about how my body appears and much more about how I feel inside my body and what my body is capable of doing. The subtitle to my book is A Woman's Guide to Health in the Body You Actually Have. And that was really important for me to put out there because everyone's body comes with its own limitations of some kind and its own genetics and its own ideal makeup. And so we can try really hard, but we just aren't going to fit the ideal in one way or another. And so how do we care for these bodies that we actually have? So that's been the big switch for me. And I'm not perfect at it by any means. I forget a lot that I'm worrying less about the way my body looks now. And I really just want to take care of how I feel and this body that I actually have and keeping it healthy.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember making the shift from, okay, I want to be this size,
yes,
to I want to be healthy. I want to be able to play with my grandkids. my bar is set pretty low for, I want a sustainable approach to living where I enjoy life, but I want to be healthy, which, I think is how we get there. But I do think that comparison again comes in and I love what you said about the uniqueness of our bodies, because I think that's true in every area of our life. Like there were times I would look at other people's marriages and think, gosh, they have it all together and they're whatever. But forgetting they don't have what we are dealing with. They don't have my kids. They don't have whatever our diagnoses are. Like just remembering I am a unique person. And what's going on in my body is unique. I had to laugh at how many times women ask you, is it my thyroid?
Yes.
Because, and I do have a thyroid thing, but that's the first thing I go to. I'm like, okay, first I got to figure out, is this my thyroid or am I just depressed because it's that time in my cycle or whatever? So that was interesting. But it's interesting too that you mentioned your daughter, because social media is just the worst place to go. I have an account on social media, but I don't go there. And I'm getting ready to delete it because that was a place that got me, but I know it's a place. I've been reading The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and listen, that's a scary book, but a good, important book. But he has a chapter in there specifically for girls, for daughters, and for, if the parents are reading the book. And yeah, so much of what they are basing their identity on is what they're seeing in other people. So again, it's interesting that starts as early as 8, and here we are in our 40s and 50s, and we're still trying for a different body that's not ours.
Right. And I do think marketers are just so good. And so they hear us having these conversations about how we just want to be healthy, or we want to be fit, or we want to play with our grandkids, or that kind of thing. And so now there is like wellness culture and kind of fit culture. And I feel like if you just peel back a layer or so, it's actually like beauty and diet culture in disguise. They're just kind of using different words. And so I think that part is really hard for me too, because sometimes it'll be like, well, I'm not trying to lose weight. But I am just doing this super restrictive diet that also counts all my calories. And then, I'm exercising this and this because I want to be in a smaller size, because I just want to be fit. But I'm like, well, that's actually diet culture again, right? So I think it just keeps coming back to us over and over. And we think maybe we've switched our mindset, but then we're doing many of the same things that maybe we had done before that haven't worked. And so we're in just a hard spot, I think, as women. And unfortunately, we're surrounded by that kind of culture and people who want to sell us things.
Right. Absolutely. Which actually goes perfect with what I was going to ask you next, because listen, if I see if I saw a supplement that said, you're going to get rid of your body fat and be nice to your children all day, I'm like, I'm buying it. Like, that's the supplement that I need. So I loved that you talked about supplements, from a woman, a mom, and a doctor. Like, we kind of got the whole picture. But there were so many things that you pointed out to consider that I had never even thought of. So that was a great, great chapter. Talk a little bit about how women can determine which supplements they actually need. And maybe if you want to touch on some of the, I don't know if danger is the right word, but just being careful with what you're taking and everything being labeled, natural, all natural.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's just what we were talking about. The supplement industry is a booming industry. And I, just like you, wish that it would be true. I wish that what they were selling me so often was true. I want that, one thing, that blend that's just going to take away all of my troubles, and I won't feel tired, and I won't have brain fog, and I'll want to have sex with my husband more, and I'll be more patient with my kids, and all the things. I feel like there are so many promises out there in different supplements. And I wish it was true, but often it's not. And so I don't want to say we shouldn't take any supplements and the whole thing is bad. But the purpose of that chapter was to just get people thinking about, why am I taking this? And is it actually doing what it's claiming it will do? Is it necessary? Sure. Is it necessary for me? So yeah, that supplement industry is a booming industry. And I think we get caught up because we have this belief that all natural means perfectly safe and without risk. And that also isn't true. And I give some examples of all natural things in the book that really actually are quite dangerous. And so I do think danger or risk is the word to use. And so I just want us to be a little bit discerning about what we're taking and why, and what are the risks. Because if there is a potential for a benefit from a supplement that you're taking, there is always a potential for some risk. And so I do talk in there about how to look at scientific studies and the kind of questions that you want to ask when you're looking at a study. So someone just saying it's backed by science is not a good enough reason to take something. I would encourage you to actually look at what studies have to say, and to look at studies that are not sponsored by the person who is selling that supplement. And then just the idea that there is much different regulation and standardization of supplements than there are of medications. And so the only thing that's required to be on a supplement is something like some disclaimer that says something like, this is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent disease. And that's their disclaimer to say, use at your own risk. And so I do just want to caution women that there is some risk there. And I do take some time to say the 4 supplements that I do recommend for women to take in midlife. And really it's only 4: calcium, vitamin D, and omega-3. And if you need it, fiber, if you're not getting enough in your diet. And for most of the other ones, it's unlikely that you need them unless you have some other underlying medical problem, or you have an absorptive problem, or you're on some kind of special diet or something like that.
Yeah. That, and what you talked about in those studies, like how to look at a study, was fascinating too. So I definitely recommend people look at that. And you also brought up the point that in the book that some of these can mix with prescriptions that we may be on.
That's right. So if you do decide to take a supplement, and I always recommend if you're taking something to take a single ingredient supplement, stick away from the blends. We have a much better idea of what's in it and how much of that particular ingredient is in it when it's a single ingredient than when it's like a proprietary blend. That means kind of secret recipe. And, how do we know what's in a secret recipe? We don't then. But if you do decide to take a supplement, make sure it's on your list of medications when you go see your provider. It should be listed just like your prescription medications, because there are interactions that can happen.
Yeah, that was interesting to me, and probably something I should have known, but didn't or ignored on that intake form.
Yeah, or we think it's no big deal. Yeah, it's no big deal. Yeah. It's just like it's
all natural.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that was such a helpful part of the book, and I love what you just shared with us. You write a lot about stress and trauma, and I just love, again, the different examples and personal stories you or people or patients that you give. Because again, I feel like there is, we're so complex anyway, even if we didn't have trauma or stress at home or whatever. So, but I love the value that you give to all of those other things. And again, that's why I was like, once I read the book, I was like, I wish I love my doctor, but you're really thinking like a mom and a woman and everything that a wife and everything that encompasses that. But I do want to talk about stress. One of the things that you pointed out, and I've done a lot of therapy. My listeners know this, and I'm all for it. And I'm like, everyone should go do some therapy. I don't know what's happened in your life, but you got some baggage somewhere. But this was the first I had heard about the stress cycle and then the need to complete it. And you gave some great examples, but that literally blew me away. And it was so practical. But I wonder, I know that's a whole probably chapter or so. Can you give us maybe the Cliff Notes version of that and some ways that we can just on our own complete that stress cycle when it happens?
Yeah, sure. I had never really heard it framed as that either, I suppose. And so I do want to reference the book that I sort of talk about in my chapter there. There's a really great book all about stress called Burnout, and it's by the Nagoski sisters. And they really talk about how it is a cycle. They go into all of the brain chemistry and everything that's going on in your body, and then how to sort of move through the cycle. But yes, the Cliff Notes version is stress is actually good for our bodies. We are supposed to have a stress response, right? We have that inborn in us to keep us safe and to understand when we're upset about something or if something is a threat to us. And so our autonomic nervous system, which is kind of the automatic nervous system, we're not thinking about it, it's operating on its own, kicks in whenever we come under stress. And that could be a predator or something we need to run away from and actually fight off. Or it could just be stress at work. Maybe we have a boss we don't like, or something's going on with a kid, or, the kid calls us, something happened at school, something like that. And that stress response kicks in automatically, right? We've got the sympathetic nervous system, which kind of revs us up. That is cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, kind of all of those activating neurotransmitters and hormones that come into overdrive. And then we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which kind of kicks off. That is our rest and digest nervous system that kind of controls digestion and immunity and things like that. We don't need it in times of immediate stress. And so they really talk about how often in today's world, we're not fighting off a predator. We don't have to run away. We have those same feelings on the inside because all of those same systems have been activated, but really it's just our boss at work or whatever. We can't really punch him and move on, right?
Right.
And so we come home from work and we've got all of those things activated, and how useful it is for us to sort of come back into regulation when we complete the cycle. And so I quote some of their suggestions because they're awesome suggestions. And exercise is a great way when you get home, go for a really vigorous walk and just walk it out, or run or something like that. So exercise is huge. Emotional expression. Maybe you need to have a good cry on the way home from work. That really helps you complete the cycle. Just having some social interaction with someone who loves you, or affection. Maybe you need to call a friend on the way home and vent, or you need to let it out to your husband when you get home. And then creative expression is also really important as well. And so sometimes for me as a writer, I just need to write about it, kind of tell the story in my own words. And then somehow I can kind of come back to, that state of calm again. So, their whole point of the book, as you read through, is we're going to come up against stress every day. And so completing the cycle is not something we just do every once in a while when we're thrown into like the big terrible moments of life, but even just the little things like the stressful drive on the way home because of traffic, or the stress at the grocery store trying to get in, and just whatever it is, that's an everyday thing that we need to complete. I thought that was really, really helpful. And especially as women in midlife, kind of juggling all of the things, to just say, okay, what did I do today for me and to complete that cycle? Did I get out there for a walk? Do I need to call my friend? Do I need to just sit in the bathtub and have a good cry?
Right.
Whatever it is, I think we've got to be cognizant of that. So we're not stuck in that heightened stress.
Right.
Yeah.
And, having teenagers can, we can have a conversation and all of a sudden but I love that. I love when you were talking about journaling too, because I know a good friend of ours who's a therapist always says the more you can process the stress or trauma, but I think it would relate to stress, the more you can process it by writing it out or talking about it, the less control it has and the less sting, I guess, it has. So yeah, so many good things with that.
Yeah. And I think trauma has its own kind of separate side to that. I have been to therapy as well. I have some history of trauma in my life. And I know one of the things that I've talked with my therapist about is kind of my automatic responses. So I can have something small happen that's completely unrelated to maybe what my past trauma is. And then I think because of trauma or things that kind of lie inside already, like I can have an automatic or sometimes overwhelming response. And we've talked about that so many times. And she's like, hey, that first thought you may have no control over and it may just come. But I think it's the awareness of, oh, I'm doing that thing again. Right. I'm actually not experiencing any trauma or having, anything like that going on, but I am upset over this other thing. So I think trauma has its own unique layer on top of our day-to-day stress that's sort of always there. Yeah.
Sure. And I love that because you do have to name it and realize it's that self-awareness piece. The more aware I am of what road my thoughts are starting to go down, I have a little bit more control over, just like you said, how I respond or how I act. Yeah. A couple of chapters on stress or life derailments in your book. I just wonder, do you have other advice that you'd want to give in this area, particularly for women facing changes during midlife?
Yeah. So I think we have our regular day-to-day stress, right? And then every once in a while, a derailment comes along,
right.
And it just kind of throws us completely off the tracks, right? And that, again, is kind of its own thing. And I think in many ways, they're all unique to us, but they're sometimes unavoidable. Like everyone's going to come up against something like that at one point or another, right? Mm-hmm. And, I just come back to what are my immediate needs there? And that's what people describe as survival mode. And so you can kind of take off the table things like, well, I've been doing this exercise program and I'm not going to get to here, or I'm not going to get, like, what are the immediate needs, and attending to those and really naming those as first and foremost. Because I think what happens a lot of times is we throw our immediate needs out and we forget about eating regularly or resting or getting enough sleep, or that walk is still really important. And so that's kind of that first things first approach, and really prioritizing yourself during that time and just throwing grace over all the rest of it. Like if you can't get to the emails or the school thing or the whatever it is, like just put some grace on all of those things and attend to those immediate needs. Because we end up in those situations so many different times, and each time it's a little bit different. So even though you've been there before, it's like, well, I did not see this coming. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And depending on what part of your month that derailment hits you.
Oh, for sure.
It can be. There are times that, I'm crying and I'm telling my family, I'm really okay. I promise. It's not that big of a deal. I'll be fine next week.
I think our capacity changes throughout the month, right? And so I think there's more discussion about that now. And some of that is purely anecdotal. I don't know that we have like really good studies on that, but I've certainly experienced it in my own life where I'm like, you know what? I'm lower capacity this week. And that everybody needs to know it. And I'm going to take some things off my plate and then come back to me in a week or two and I'll be in a much different headspace.
Right. Yeah. For sure. I'm pausing the interview there, but there is more to come in the next episode of Unperfect. In episode number 101, Dr. Albertsen will be diving into more topics like hormones, our struggle as women to prove our worth, our identity perceptions throughout our changing seasons, and just accepting who we are and who God has made us to be. We even discuss sex, sleep, and CPAP machines, so you don't want to miss it. But before we go today, I want to leave you with these 4 takeaways that you can start practicing right now in light of all the insights Dr. Albertsen shared with us today. Number 1, remind yourself daily, if needed, that if you are walking around in a very difficult and complicated life, you, my friend, my sister, you are not doing it wrong. You are living a real, authentic life. And the God who created you and loves you is walking it with you. Number 2, go take an inventory of your medicine cabinet and see where you may need to scrap some of your current supplements and just hang on to the few that Dr. Albertsen suggested. And then remember to list each of your supplements that you're taking when you see your practitioner, because some really do interfere with the other medications that you may be on. Number 3, make sure you're completing your stress cycle. When things come up that are stressful, and if you're breathing, they will. I had one come up today, and I plan to hop onto the elliptical for a few minutes and spend some more time talking to Jesus about it. But you figure out how you can unwind from that stress so you're not just ignoring it or stuffing it. And lastly, number 4, if you find yourself in a part of your cycle today where you just can't, you know what I'm talking about, you just can't anymore. Hear me say this. I'm reiterating what Michaela shared. You don't have to. Figure out what your immediate need is and let some of that other stuff go. Just because you physically can do it all, you don't have to. And it's probably not going to be what's best for you or your family to try to do it all. In celebration of our 100th Unperfect episode, would you please take time to give us a good rating on whatever platform you're on? Also, if you would take a second and send the link to this episode with a friend that you know it would encourage, that would be huge. That would be huge. As always, I am praying that you are able to see glimpses of God's glory in the now and the not yet of your unperfect life this week. I'll see you next time.